knives, and they're going to be a gift. And I thought about a way to display them. I thought about normal knife blocks that you would put the knife in and then the handle would be sticking up, but these are Damascus steel knives and they're kind of fancy looking, I guess. So I wanted to think of a way to actually display the entire knife or knives without hiding them. And I looked online and there was a couple different designs, and one of them that I liked, basically there's magnets hidden in the wood, and then the knives will stick to the wood. But I wanted to go, for some reason I'm a masochist, so I like doing things the hard way. So I thought, well, how can I do this as hard as possible and make it look really cool? So I went out and got a bunch of different exotic woods. I've got some Brazilian ebony, some East Indian rosewood. Got, this would be red heart, and katalox, and some Wenge, couple things of that. This is bubinga, which I think I'm going to actually use for a cutting board. This is, I'm not sure what this is. I don't know. It's a dark colored wood. I got some Mexican Kingwood. Got some African blackwood. Got some bloodwood. Big slab of purple heart, which is what I made the handles out of. And I got a couple of little random pieces here. But the idea is, and this is Padauk. And I've also got some pink ivory, which I'm not really sure if I'll use in this or not. I want to try and keep the colors. It's going to be a chaotic pattern, but I don't want to have any like light colors in there. So nothing too light. Even the Padauk might be a little bit too light. So we'll see how this works out. Some more African blackwood here. So the idea is, I'm going to cut these up in a bunch of smaller pieces and then mix them up, glue them up, and then cut them again, and mix those pieces up, and hopefully it'll turn out decent. So follow along for the ride and we'll see how this goes.
So the first thing I did was I cut all of my pieces to 9-inch lengths. Some of them were already 9 inches, some were 18, some were 12, so I just cut them all so that they would be roughly the same length, 9 inches. And then I jointed all the pieces so that I would have a square edge to reference off of. Then I planed the other side of all the pieces. And once I'd done that, I cut all of the pieces in half so that I would have a bunch of basically 1/2-inch wide pieces. And then I went through and tried to sort them, mixing up the colors as best I could.
Okay, I'm getting ready to glue these up into sets of 3 so I can have a bit of a mixture. One thing with these exotic woods is that most of them are way denser than what your domestic woods would be. African blackwood, for instance, is one of the densest woods you can get. I don't know if you can hear that, but it feels like it's made out of metal. That's how solid it is. And how wood glue works is it's basically water based, in that it seeps into the grain and hardens, and that's how it makes its bond. With some of these exotic woods that are extremely dense, this stuff doesn't work as well. It can work, but your results may vary. So one thing you can try to do, and I'm going to try to do and see how my results work out, is just use regular
Gorilla Glue. And this is a polyurethane based glue, not wood based. And epoxy would probably work well as well, but I don't want to use all my epoxy on all these glue ups, so I'm just going to try this and see how it goes. I left these clamped up overnight. One thing I didn't realize about Gorilla Glue is that it foams up like this, which wasn't a big deal, but just required a lot of cleanup. So I used a chisel and went through and tried to clean up as much of the excess as I could so that I could run it through my jointer and planer. Some of these pieces had different widths. Like this piece, you can see the bottom piece is wider than the top two pieces. So I used my table saw to just cut off that excess, and that also cut off the glue foam that was built up on the outside of it. I also have a few pieces that are stacked like this, where the two pieces were smaller than the third that was bigger, so I mixed them this way. This will also give me a more chaotic pattern in the end. And once I'd finished planing all the pieces, I cut them all in half again. As you can see, I have quite a few pieces now, and at this point, you just go through and mix them all up again. At this point, I glued these up into about 4 different sections that were about 5 inches wide. That way I could still run them across my jointer. And as you can see, my tape was kind of screwing me up here. I was pulling the pieces up. So as I tightened it, I just kept pushing all the pieces down until they were pretty flat for the most part. They didn't have to be perfect because I was going to flatten them again on the jointer and planer, but wanted to get them roughly close. Then I ran these all across the jointer again. And I went ahead and squared up the other edge on all of them as well. Then I cut off some of the excess on my bandsaw. That way I wouldn't have to take as many passes on my planer. Then I went through and flattened the other side. And here I'm just making sure they're perfectly flat with each other. There's no ridges, no high spots. So when I glue them up, they'll be perfectly flat. Then I glued these 3 pieces together to make one big piece. And I used some cawls and clamps to keep the edges flat with each other, so it would be perfectly flat across all the pieces. Then I went through and sanded them to clean up all the excess glue. I tried to make these passes as even as possible across the entire thing, that way I wouldn't deform it at all, so it would still stay perfectly flat, or as close to perfectly flat as I could manage. At this point, it was finally time to cut off the ends and reveal the chaotic pattern, which is always an exciting part of the process. Now I'm setting my fence to be exactly 1 inch away from the blade. I'm going to make all of these cuts so that the pieces come out to 1 inch thick. And here's the result after cutting it up into 1 inch strips. I had made a template with the outline of the knife, so I knew roughly how big to make this. Then you just go through and flip all the pieces around and mix them up. That way you get more of a chaotic pattern. Unfortunately, my placement of the camera is pretty bad here, and you don't really get to see what I'm doing, but I'm using a biscuit joiner to put 3 slots across the width of all these strips, so that way I can put biscuits in them to help keep the whole thing flat when I glue it up. You can kind of see them right there. Now it's time to glue it up. At this point, I just used regular wood glue, and it actually worked just fine, so I probably could have used it across the whole project, but it's one of those things where my luck, it wouldn't have worked at first. One thing I did fail to mention with these exotic woods in the earlier segment is that some of them can be really oily, and that's one reason why wood glue won't work as well. All of these seem to be pretty dry. I didn't really find any of them to be oily, so I didn't really have a problem with it. But that's something to keep in mind if you happen to get some exotic woods to build something out of. Then I just took a chisel and scraped off the excess glue that had dried on the surface. Then it was time to sand. I started with 80 grit to get all of the glue off, excess glue that is, and make it nice and flat. And then I just worked up through the grits until I got to 220. At this point, I just cut the edges off to square them up. After the glue up, they're not perfectly aligned, so just take a nice light cut and make it square. Here I'm using a 1/2 inch roundover bit to put a 1/2 inch roundover on the corner that the knives are going to be setting on. I noticed with the bolsters on the knives, having a roundover, they sat a lot more flush, as you can see here. With a sharp corner, they kind of wanted to lean forward and fall off a bit, so this worked really well. Now it's time to drill the holes for the magnets. This is something where you want to try and get the hole as close as you can to the other edge so the magnet doesn't have to go through as much wood, but it's also a bit of a nerve-wracking point because you don't want to drill through the whole thing and screw up your build at this point, but it went just fine. And then I put some powerful rare earth magnets in these holes and glued them in, and then I had 1/2 inch round dowel that I would just stick in there to hold the magnet in place and saw it off. I think I have about 30 magnets in this thing, about 10 for each row, and there's 3 rows. And this worked really well, actually, for holding the knives on. It's one of those things, before you start, you're like, I sure hope this works, but yeah, it did. It worked just fine. Then I sanded the back to get it nice and flush, which took a while. Now it was time to make the base, and I have this 8/4 walnut that was left over from my trestle table build, and so I cut it to the right width. And obviously it wouldn't fit across my jointer, but since it was so thick and pretty flat for the most part, I just ran it through my planer, and that worked just fine. Now I set my blade to be 3 degrees off of 90, so at 87 degrees. And so this, I'm going to cut the base and the bottom of the knife block itself so that it tilts back at a 3-degree angle. So I cut the base first. I really need to make a 0 clearance insert for my table saw. I lose pieces down through that slot all the time, and it's really annoying. And then I cut the same 3 degrees on the bottom of the knife block itself, just so it would sit flush with whatever surface it was sitting on. Nope, there goes another one, lost another piece. Again, kind of another poor camera angle, but I'm just cutting the corners off of the base like this so that we can put the knife block into a corner on our kitchen counter. And then it was time to attach it. And I just glued it to the bottom, nothing too fancy here. It was kind of a weird one to clamp up. I found the best way to do it was just to clamp it to the table like this, and that worked pretty well.
This, of course, is the best part. Or the fun part, at least. Just using some mineral oil. Just rubbing it in. I'll soak the whole thing. This is end grain, so it's gonna soak a lot of this up, which is fine. That's what I want it to do. Alright, and pretty much the last step. So I got some beeswax, turpentine, it's melted. I'm gonna do this when it's warm, so hopefully it soaks it up a little bit, but you can do this when this is cold as well. And I'll let that sit for about an hour. And I'll come back and polish it off. Alright, it's been an hour. I'm going to wipe off the excess. What little there is.
After wiping off the excess, I polished it by hand for a good 15-20 minutes, just rubbing it in as best as I could. And here's the finished product. In all, it took about 2.5 weeks of on and off working on it. Most of that time was gluing something up, then letting it sit for 24 hours, and then so forth. But I'm really happy with how it turned out, and it made a pretty good gift.
Okay. Yeah, come out. As the cat comes out and.
Holy crap! Oh my god, babe! Holy crap.
Good job.
Cat's just done a cat before. Oh my god, did you make these?
I made the handles, yeah.
Holy, oh my god. Oh my god. How do they attach?
Magnets in the back.
In the back?
They're embedded into the wood. Yeah.
Oh wow. Oh wow, babe. Oh wow. How did you do that? How did you do that? How the heck did you do that?
They're in the back.
How?
They come up right. You know, they're not all the way through, obviously.
Wow. Oh wow.
It's chef knives.
That's pretty pretty.
What? Don't cry.
I just put makeup on too. It's so pretty. What is this one for?
It's a bread knife. You never seen a bread
No,
knife
I've never
before?
seen a bread knife. We know how those rich knives was growing up.
That one's for vegetables.
Oh my god.
The meat cleaver, obviously.
Ah,
It's Damascus steel.
I know.
That's why it's careful. It's really sharp.
Wow. That's really pretty. How did you do the handles?
I took video, but I'll make a video at some point and show
Oh god, I can't really see clear right now. Sorry. How does this work?
you. It's just careful. It's just a big piece of wood that.
Oh god.
And this
This is really pretty.
yeah, that's made out of like 8
Oh,
different
wow.
exotic woods.
Oh wow, babe. That is gorgeous. Look at that color.
Yeah.
What is this one?
This is
The darker one.
this one is the Kingwood, I'm pretty sure.
That's Kingwood. And what's this textured one?
That one's Wenge.
Oh, what's this one?
Some of these are hard to tell when they
It
get.
looks like that's redwood. And it says this purple heart. I know that.
No, these are
No?
purple heart.
Oh, that's really dark. Wow.
Yeah. And there's katalox in here, which I think that's African
That's really
ebony, I'm
pretty.
pretty sure. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, these
wow.
are red. This is pink ivory.
Pink ivory?
Yeah.
Like real ivory?
No.
Okay, I
No,
was
no.
gonna say like
It's
you
wood.
didn't do that right.
No, it's not.
You're not doing that right. I
Yeah,
know.
I killed an elephant.
Oh god. Oh my gosh. That took forever.
Yeah, it took a while.
God. Oh wow, babe. Oh wow. And you like put the things through here?
Yeah, drilled the holes and then put the magnets in and then put these walnut dowels in.
Yeah,
but-
it looks intentional.
Yeah, it is.
Looks pretty. Like it's like a pretty design going on.
Hmm.
It's really pretty. Oh wow. Yeah, this is like this is stick right to it.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Oh god. I'm gonna cry with
Nope.
oil on my hands.